In 2000, he sailed round the globe on the world's toughest yacht race. He battled hurricanes, icebergs, and 100-foot waves, and he went back for more. In 2014, he did it all again, but this time with a very different crew. His crew were his children and his wife, aged 9, 7, 2, and I'm not allowed to say. He's built many teams, but this was by far the toughest. His recent book, Where the Magic Happens, became an international bestseller. He's regularly featured in the media globally, from CNN to the BBC and the Financial Times. He shares his stories and insights on stages around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Round the World sailor, team building and leadership expert, and officially the best dad in the world, Caspar Craven.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here this afternoon. Now, let me just quickly check in before we go any further. Who here has children? Okay, that's what I thought, most of you. Who here remembers being a child? Okay, hopefully all of you. And who here thinks I must be absolutely mad to take 3 children under the age of 10 around the world? Okay, yeah, that's the usual reaction. And from what I know this morning, you're most likely to be elephants as well, by the way. So it's usually the detail people who think I'm completely nuts. So look, in the 45 minutes I've got with you today, what I'd like to take you through is the topic of embracing the storm. Because we all know that there are challenges ahead in our lives, in our businesses, politically, economically, and the only thing that makes a difference is how you react to that and respond to that when that comes up. So what I'd like to do is to take you on a journey around the world, and as I do that, I'd like to pull out some insights and lessons that I've learned along the way about building teams that can really withstand the storm when it comes. And as we go through, I'll also weave in some stories, because in my past I used to work in corporate finance. I had 5 years buying, selling businesses. I was also a finance director and went in and sold businesses from the inside, but also had my own business, which I took through a sale process. So hopefully I've got lots of stories which will resonate with some of the things that you might be facing in your day-to-day lives. So, step 1, simple question, right? Where are we heading? And everything in my world always starts with an idea. And what I'd like to do, by the way, I'm going to use my captain's log here to give a time frame to where we are. So our idea back in 2009 was with my wife. We made the decision that we wanted to do something radically different with our lives. And back then we had 2 children. And we set our minds that we wanted to go on an expedition for 2 years to sail around the world with our kids. And for about 6 months, we spent a lot of time at our kitchen table here getting really clear on when we were going to go, how we were going to do this, and how we were going to get the money together. We spent a lot of time planning that. We came up with a vision statement, much like you would in your business world. And on this vision statement, we had the date we were going to leave and all these different factors about how we wanted to go and undertake this expedition. And we said the 1st of August 2014 was when we were going to set sail. So when we told everybody, everybody laughed and told us all the reasons that we shouldn't do this. And to be honest, there were quite a lot of good reasons. The one thing we had in our favor was that I'd sailed around the world before. So we did have a lot of experience, or I had a lot of experience. But there were lots of reasons why not. So the first thing is money. By the way, the first time that people meet me, they usually say, your name's Caspar, you sound a bit posh, you must have lots and lots of money. The reality, back when we had the idea, I had a small data analytics company. We had sales of about £400,000, and we were losing money. And I'd have earned more money stacking shelves in the local supermarket. So the idea was pretty ridiculous. Nicola, my wife, she couldn't sail. In fact, she'd been on a boat twice, and she'd been seasick both times. And on top of that, we didn't have a boat. So lots and lots of good reasons why we shouldn't do this. But the heart of this, right, this is a story about taking on seemingly impossible challenges and how you overcome those. Because this is something that I believe to be absolutely true. In your business life, in your personal life, if you make a committed decision and say, that's the thing over there that I'm going to go and do, if you've got time and if you've got energy, I believe you can make anything happen. So very simply, the lessons that I pull out of all of this, both for business life and for personal life, is to get really clear, what's the idea, and then very simply, what's the story that wraps all this up? I remember in my corporate world, I used to work for KPMG for some years, and I always got confused between the language with the vision statement, mission statement, and it just fried my head. So it's just like, what's the story? Where are we going? And that was the thing that we distilled down. We also embraced the reality of the situation. We weren't crazy in terms of the fact there were all these different things and we ignored them. We listened to every single one of those reasons of why we shouldn't do this, and we started to figure out a way around that. So we embraced the reality. Big goal, but also we knew where we were. It was exactly the same process in my business as well. I went back and I shared these ideas with my business partner, and we created a story in his personal life and the story of the business of where we were going. And that's fundamentally where everything starts, is a powerful story. So step 2, for me, this is all about creating what I call the culture of we, not me. And we're in a time period now, 2009 through to 2012. And in my business, the numbers had done something like this. We'd grown a bit, but basically we'd plateaued and we'd actually dipped a little bit. And I want to introduce you to my business partner, Ed. And he's sitting in our offices in London. And you're probably looking at that, saying, why is he wearing those yellow ear defenders? So the actual reason was that we were on a really busy road and it was to cut out the noise. But actually, the metaphor that it conveys was far more powerful. In our business, I wasn't listening to him, he wasn't listening to me, and neither of us were really listening to the messages that the business was telling us and what we should be doing. Einstein's often credited with a definition of insanity, of doing the same thing but expecting a different result. That was us. And that went on for 2 to 3 years. I realized that I had to go and immerse myself in learning, because that deadline of 2014, it was 5 years away before, and I'd always said I'm going to sell my business in 5 years, but whenever I'd said it, it had always been 5 years and it had moved out. By putting that deadline of 2014, it was getting closer and closer. So I was really feeling the pressure of that. I went and immersed myself in learning. I started going to conferences, events, finding the smartest people that I could. And at the beginning of 2012, I went back into my business literally like a tornado. And I had all these ideas. I was the ultimate lion, right? I had the ideas, and this is what the answer. This is what we're going to go and do with the business. And that went on for 3 months, until at the end of March 2012, my business partner, Ed, took me to one side, and he said, Caspar, you are being a nightmare. He said, if you carry on doing what you're doing, every single person, including me, is going to leave the business. Now just think about that for a moment. You've got 2 years to go. You've told everybody you're going to get on a boat and go and sail around the world, and you've got tons of preparation, and the thing that's going to get you there is literally just about to disintegrate. What do you do? I went and found this lady. She became my savior. Her name's Margaret Meyer. And she taught me all about leadership. And funny enough, we were sitting down drawing pictures of animals and figuring out how I was responding and working with the rest of the team. And what I realized was that we had to do this together. It couldn't just be me having all the answers. Margaret told me this phrase here, which really stuck in my mind, that if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I've been trying to do it all on my own, and going together was the answer. The lion, right? So the first thing we did was we did a huge amount of work on our values. And I went back home, and Margaret said to me, it's like, right, you need to work out your values together. And the importance of values is that values are the things that shape your behaviors. Behaviors shape your actions, actions shape your outcomes. So they really are the building block for everything. But I made another mistake here, because I went home and I figured out what our values were, and I went back to the business and I said, here you are, here's our values. And they just laughed at me. And it was like, okay, I hadn't learned the mistake yet. So our values here, we actually went and co-created them. We got everybody involved in shaping what the values were as a business. And we didn't just define them once, we spent time talking about what is it that we do when we display this value at its very best. And we started rewarding people, giving out chocolate bars for people who were displaying behaviors in accordance with the values. We were trying to ingrain how to do things. That, as well as getting really clear on the story for where our business was going, was one of the things that started to transform the organization. Over the next 12 months, we grew at the fastest rate we'd ever grown before. We made more profit than we made in the previous 6 years combined, and smiles and energy started to resonate through the business. This is us in Amsterdam going away to celebrate, and the business was really now starting to take off because I'd moved it around from being an egocentric business to saying, how do we engage the skills and talents of everybody in the room? This was a saying that we developed in the business. No ego. It doesn't matter who is right, it only matters what is right. And we developed this ideas meritocracy, where the best ideas would float to the surface, and those would be the things that we would do. So around the same time, I was thinking, how am I going to prepare my family to go around the world? Because you know that at some point, some child is going to turn around and say this. You know what it's like when you get your kids in the car, right, and you're going down the motorway, and someone's like, I need to stop and to go to the wee-wee, please, and we're nearly there yet. So we had to think carefully about this, because the danger was we'd end up with 3 terrorists. By the way, we had a 3rd child now as well. But we had to think about how we're going to engage everybody in the team. And here's what we did. All the things that were working for us in the business, we decided to bring those ideas home as well. So we created a set of family values. And this is my son, he's called Columbus, by the way. It was almost as though I knew we were going to do this at some point. And by the way, you can see that's the map of the world we had in our kitchen, and that's the vision statement we had on the wall so everybody could see it. But we created this values picture, and the kids were involved in creating it, and the values were things like laugh, love, action, understanding, and you can see all our handprints squidged around the side. So we spent time co-creating these values. This step here, for me, it was all about realizing, do you want to go far or do you want to go fast? And if you want to go far, then you've really got to engage the team of people around you. It reminds me of a story when I was called into a business as an interim finance director. The business was going through a sale process. They had 3 private equity firms interested, and the numbers had suddenly gone off track, and they'd lost confidence in the financial controller. And I got called in to come and tighten the numbers up and to give everybody confidence in the process that things were actually on track. What they were missing in their team at that time was a finance director. So it's a question of looking and saying, what's the thing that's missing in the team? How do we get the team of all the different strengths we need to go towards the outcome? Okay, step 3, relentless action. 2012, 2014 is the time period. And by now, the business is really taking off. We're growing at a fantastic rate. And we're starting to think about how do we get everybody involved. So we start taking the children and Nicola on sort of really gentle sailing trips around the Mediterranean. My little one, Willow, there, she's about 3 months old at that point. So just getting everybody used to being on board. And we were developing the rituals and the habits right from the get-go. So when we're sailing, everybody wears a life jacket all the time, so children and adults. Whenever anybody's on deck, they're always clipped on. And it's interesting because my wife, Nicola, she's out here with me at the moment. She used to be a barrister. And we have this standing joke between us that if anything was down to me, it would never ever get finished. I'm a classic lion. If it was down to Nicola, it would never ever get started. She's a classic elephant. So we had both skill sets combined between us. This is an example of the lengths that we went to. So for the last 2 years, whenever you saw Nicola, she'd have a big file underneath her arm with all these spreadsheets covering things like first aid, weather routing, radio courses, right down to how do you do potty training with a 2-year-old on board the boat. All those reasons why we shouldn't do it. They sounded like criticism and reasons not to do it, but for us, they were things to think deeply about, to do our research, and to come to our own conclusions. We were not taking anything lightly in this. Lots of training courses, climbing in and out of life rafts, should the worst happen. And Nicola, I've got no idea why she's looking so happy on this, in this photo, but we both trained to become ship's doctors, which is the most intense medical training you can do outside of becoming a doctor or a nurse. So we both qualified as ship's doctors. And by this time, by the way, we still haven't got a boat. So we're in 2014. At this point, everyone is saying, well, you're not going to go now, are you? But we had actually been looking at boats quite carefully over the past few years, and we were quite close to buying one. In amongst all of this, what do you do when you've got loads of things going on? You go and run the London Marathon. So I completed that. I raised about £5,000 for a children's charity. But the relevance of showing you this, if you look carefully at that picture, I'm a little bit wonky. I'm not standing up very straight. I'll come back to that in a moment. Beginning of May 2014, we finally bought our boat. Her name's Aretha, and she very quickly became the 6th member of our family. But we had a lot of work to do to get her ready. Literally going through the boat, child-proofing it, putting netting around the boat, going through it as though I was a 2-year-old. Where are the risk areas? What do we need to do to be able to manage every single issue that might arise? We took the boat out for a test sail. We went down the English Channel, and the boat performed absolutely magnificently. I, on the other hand, did not. Remember the wonky back picture here? So at this point, we'd gone down on this sailing trip, and we went ashore in one place, and I went out walking, and my back went just like that. And basically, I had a problem in the marathon. I should have stopped at about mile 20, but I continued. My crew got us home. I got referred to see a surgeon, and I had MRI scans, and basically said, look, you've got a bulging disc, L4, L5, for those who know anything about these things. And so I had a real problem with my back. Mr. Mendoza, my surgeon, he said, look, you've got a choice. Either I can give you the surgery, or this might resolve itself on its own. And it was one of those horrible dilemmas. What do you do? Everything is lined up. You've got the business moving along well, you've got the boat, and you're about to go off and do this, and you've got a real problem medically. This is what I come back to with any seemingly impossible situation. If there's something that you said you're going to go and do, you'll either find a way or you'll find an excuse. Those are the only two outcomes. In my experience, people who are good at making excuses are generally not very good at making outcomes happen. So this is the view from the 15th of July from my hospital bed. I had the surgery. The surgery was a complete success. I'm fine now, and I was fine back then. It took about 3 hours, and we realized that that was okay. We were going to head off and go off on our trip, but we did have to make a couple of adjustments, which I'll talk about in a moment. But the fundamental point here, the whole thing for me about relentless action, is staying focused on that end goal, getting creative and saying, what is it that we need to do to get this to move forward? That situation that I told you about with that software company where I went in as finance director, the numbers were wobbling, as often happens in a sale process. We dug around really hard. We found about £200,000 of recurring profit opportunities in lost license sales that had been completely missed. Once you start getting creative and you start digging around, there are always things that you can find. It might not be obvious, but it's that mentality. You either find a way or you make a way. Okay, step 4, what matters most? We're in August 2014, and we're about to set sail. Now, I've got a little video to play for you, and what you will see is the real video footage as we actually set sail, but you will also see that we had some issues and problems that arose. So I'm going to play the video, and then I'm going to talk about what I learned from those problems and challenges as we went along. we asked ourselves two questions. One, have we got a good, safe boat that will look after us? And the answer to that was yes. And the second question, do we trust ourselves that we will be able to figure out the answer to whatever it is that comes up? And the answer to that was yes as well. Good enough, let's get going. We'll figure these things out as we were going along. The point is also relevant about flexibility. Because of my back, we decided to make some shifts for that first passage going across the Bay of Biscay down to Spain. We left the 2-year-old Willow at home with my in-laws. We took on board 2 friends. The other person in the video was my brother Max, because I wasn't allowed to pull on ropes and things like that. So we did make adjustments. We were flexible to make sure that we could keep going. So where are we by now? So we've left the UK, and we've sailed down the European coast down to the Canary Islands, and we're literally just at the start of the journey to go and circumnavigate. The lesson here, though, is this whole thing about what matters most. It's not waiting for perfect. It's thinking, what are the single biggest issues that you need to focus on? And it's being flexible, like we were with leaving 2-year-old Willow at home and bringing on board extra crew. We'd always said we weren't going to go and do that, but we had to find flexibility. It's like it was back in the businesses. We had to find creative approaches. I remember doing deals, and deals were about to fall off the tracks, whether it was a pension black hole had suddenly appeared, whether there was a warranty gap. I remember doing deals back around the year 2000 when all these Y2K issues, for anyone who remembers that, were coming up, and these things were going to knock deals off their tracks. You've got to find a creative way around it, right? You don't just stop. You say, we're going to keep going. Okay, step 5, building people. A happy team is a fast team. Now, this is a photo from when I sailed around the world the first time. And my skipper then, she had a saying that a fast team is a happy team, because she thought that if the boat was going fast, then everybody would be happy and we would go even faster. So what ended up, we were all fixated on the numbers. That's all we were looking at. And you can see in the picture there, no one's having any fun. We're just literally looking at the dials, looking at the wind angle, looking at the speed instruments, and saying, how can we go even faster? But that's not sustainable, because if you've got faces like that the whole time, you're not going to go and make amazing things happen. I came to realize that the numbers are the trailing indicator and the people are the leading indicator. It's all about building the people and getting them in roles that they love doing things. So, in the time frame, we're in November 2014, we're about to cross our first big ocean. This is the route here, sailing from the Canary Islands across to the Caribbean. It's going to take about 3 weeks, and it's about 3,000 miles at sea. Now, I can't come and talk to you and not talk about homeschooling, because we had to homeschool for 2 years with our children. And what we did is basically we decided to find things that were all around us. So Columbus, he learned how to use a sextant from one of our friends, Pete. He used to be an admiral in the US Navy. He used to run their Pacific Fleet. So he's teaching him how to measure angles, all the different solar bodies, and you realize the learning is all around you. I remember, though, as we're crossing the Atlantic, and I was sitting down with Columbus to try and teach him about the kings and queens of England, and I came down after an hour, and the page was just blank. And I was like, what's going on, Columbus? And he said, to be honest, I'm just really not that interested, which I get, right? We've all been there learning things. So I said, what are you interested in? And he said, I'm really interested in fishing. So we got all the fishing books out, and he started devouring those, and then telling us about the different fish that you catch in the different oceans, how you catch them, and then we started catching fish. He's now weighing them, measuring them, we're dissecting them, so it's leading us to all the different subjects. By the time we get to the Caribbean, he's set up a business making and selling fishing lures and advice sheets, and he's going in a dinghy around all the other boats and going selling the lures for $5 a piece. What we'd done is we'd found the things that really ignited him and really interested him. It was exactly the same thing that we did in my business. I remember being hired back in the day by KPMG. Here's the job description, here's the things you've got to go and do. And half the stuff I hated doing and half the stuff I loved doing. What I did, I ripped up the rule book in my business and I said, tell me what you love doing, I want to get you doing as much of that. That will leave a gap. Well, we'll go and find somebody else to fill that gap who loves doing that. And that was the way we approached it, getting people doing things they absolutely love doing. Same thing we found with the schooling. My 2-year-old Willow, she loved making a mess, so we gave her the Dyson, and she would go and hoover up everywhere. My 9-year-old Bluebell, she can talk for England, so what do? We make her our radio operator. We're playing to everybody's strengths. It's a very simple question. In the teams that you work with, do you notice the strengths? Do you get people doing the things they really love doing, the things that set them on fire? It's simple, but it's incredibly powerful. So by now, we're sailing across the Atlantic. This is our navigation chart that we would see as we go along. And at this point here, we're about 1,000 miles out from the Caribbean. And what's really interesting, as we sailed across the Atlantic in a rally of 200 other boats. Now that sounds like you might see lots of other people all the time, but it's a big ocean, so you see everybody for the first day and then nothing else. But every 6 hours we would get a report showing where all the other boats were. For the first half of the rally race, because you can't have boats out there and not be racing, we were right at the back because we were focusing on safety. But as we started to work really well as a family team, we started to get faster and faster. So by the time we arrived in St. Lucia, we ended up in the top third of the fleet. So not only were we a safe boat, but we were now a fast boat as well. That was us literally crossing the finishing line. Amazing moment, given all the reasons why we shouldn't have done that. But here's the thing, right? The whole essence to building the business team and the family team was focusing on each person's strengths, getting them in the right roles. I hadn't mentioned, by the way, close the gap on my business. What we did with that, we built up people building on their strengths. We got all the different people in the right roles. I made myself redundant because I found people who could do every single thing that I could do, and that enabled me to step out of the business because we had all these people who could take over from us. What we'd also done, we'd cultivated different conversations with potential buyers. And as we were sailing across the Atlantic, we actually had 2 offers to buy the business. And one of the things that was really important for me was creating that strategic tension. Because the work we were doing actually was largely with law firms. And we would do deals where we might get £50,000 to £100,000 worth of revenue. But actually, that would unlock around £1 million per contract of service revenue for a big technology company. And we had about 6 deals like this in our pipeline. So what we were doing weren't offering just the £50,000 to £100,000, but actually access to the much more significant revenues. So we were being strategic about how we positioned ourselves. But again, we only got there because we had super smart people in the team doing the right sorts of things to get us in that place. Okay, step 6. I'm going to go back to our values, which I talked about earlier, because in every story there's always a scary bit, right? So I've got a slightly scary story coming up for you. We're February 2015. We're about to cross the Pacific Ocean. This is going to be our route here. We're going to go through the Panama Canal, and then it's going to take us 6 months to go all the way to Australia. As we come through the Panama Canal, this is what it looks like. You're rafted up with these other boats, so you go through together, and you're very much hoping that you don't get one of these big ships coming down behind you. It's a little bit scary. You're looking at it saying, I really hope you're going to go and stop. You come out the other side, and this is the Bridge of Americas. So this is an amazing landmark for us, because it meant we'd finished the Atlantic. We're now into the Pacific, and literally it's going to be that 6 months worth of sailing until we get to Australia. By now, everyone's getting really competent on the boat. So Columbus is great steering the boat, navigating. Willow comes up on deck at the first opportunity. Land ho, I can see the land over there. And so everyone's like fully engaged. Lots of magical times, swimming around with the sharks and things like that. And this picture here is quite significant. This was the 1st of May 2015. And it was our wedding anniversary, which we celebrated in Bora Bora. But also, more significantly, that was the date that we sold our business. So we sold it for a 7-figure sum, and the only reason we were able to get it to that stage was we followed all these principles that I'm sharing with you here. That business, which we turned around from losing money and turnover of £400,000, We built it up so that it became attractive to these buyers because it had that strategic value to them. So, proof of the pudding, these ideas work. This is the island of Savaro, and we're about to have probably our most testing moment as we sail south to another island of Niue. And what was our scary moment? So we had complete power failure in the middle of the ocean. We're 500 miles from the nearest piece of land, and literally the boat goes dark. Anyone remember the film Apollo 13? Remember that? Where you've got the 3 astronauts up in space and they have complete power failure? It was a little bit like that, apart from the fact we didn't have 3 astronauts and another 50 rocket scientists back at Cape Canaveral. It was me, Nicola, and the 3 children. And we've got to figure out what to do in this situation. So no power. Basically that means you've got no autopilot, which is the system that drives the boat. No navigation systems to know where you are, no winches, no toilets, no stove, nothing. Completely isolated and out there in one of the most remote parts of the world. What would you do in that situation? How would you respond? How would you react? By the way, this photo, when things go wrong, it's always terrible weather conditions, right? We had 30 or 40 knot winds, we had waves breaking over the boat. It's the only photo I've got from that time. I wasn't thinking what would make a great photo if I became a keynote speaker. It was how do we stay alive? The dots on the photo are the driving rain. So what do we do? I'm absolutely certain if I had been back in my days working back in London, the first thing that I would have done is turn around to someone and say, it's your fault. Not you, sir, but that's what I've done. I would have blamed somebody for it, and I would have found fault. But what good is that going to do? How's that going to help us out there in the middle of nowhere? Remember our values that we talked about? We ran values prizes with our children every single day, and we talked about what was right rather than what was wrong. We were ingraining more of the things that we wanted to see. Our brains are trained, they're hardwired to look for problems, right? And focus on what's wrong. How many people do you know who start a sentence by saying, the problem is? It's endemic in our brains, right? This is the reverse of that and saying what's right in the situation. One of our values was the word laugh, so we decided to find the humor in the situation. We told the children we have no working toilets, and we introduced them to the bucket. And within minutes, they were lining up on deck to go to the toilet in the bucket and chuck it over the side. They gave it a name of the bucket and chuck it system, and they thought it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. They were literally crying with laughter as they were doing this. That broke the ice. And literally for the next 4 days, we simply lived our values. There was laughter, there was harmony, there was compassion, there was love. Nicola and I, we would hand steer the boat for half an hour at a time each. The kids would bring us up food and water on deck. We were steering by the sun, the moon, and the stars. We had enough food and water. We could have been out there for 3 months, and we would have been fine. But it was how we responded to it. Because we'd spent so long ingraining our values, that became a natural response for how we dealt with that. This is the formula that I teach my kids. E is the event, something that happens to you. You have power failure in the middle of the ocean. You have a cash flow crisis in your business. You have a deal which is about to come off the tracks, whatever it is. That's the event. R is your reaction. What do you do as a result of that? And O is the outcome. It doesn't say the event equals the outcome. It's the event plus your reaction. That's what I teach my kids. It's all about your reaction. What are you going to do in that moment? Rhetorical question. Is your team equipped to thrive in adversity? Would you blame each other? Or would you say, you know what, this is how we're going to live. This is how we're going to embrace the storm. Because you know that things will arise in your business life and your personal life. And for me, this is the emotional resilience that you have to develop together as a team, saying, how do we work together? The very quick summary. The values there define how you respond when things go wrong. That's why they're so important. I used to think back in my KPMG days, the values was a whole bunch of rubbish. And I remember we had 10 values, and by the time I got to the end of reading the second value, I couldn't even remember what the first value was. But I came to think these things are absolutely fundamental. Remember, E plus R equals O. It's your reaction that defines things. I remember when I was on the first sailing trip around the world. We were sailing down the Atlantic, coming into Argentina. There was a boat that was 24 miles ahead of us, and we had 24 hours to go. And everybody assumed that we'd lost the race to them. But we didn't approach it like that. We sat down and said, okay, what are we going to do? And we figured out some tactical shortcuts. In the end, we beat that boat over the line by 6 minutes after 40 days of racing. Why? Because we had the mindset. We were going to find a way. I remember working on a deal mandate in early 2000, and we had some offers to buy this business for 5 or 6 million, which was way below shareholder expectation. Y2K happened, and everyone's like, well, you know, the deal had stalled. We were a year into this mandate now, by the way. We went back to first stages again, first principles, and said, okay, let's look at this through fresh eyes. What are we going to go and do? We found the strategic buyer, the company that ended up paying 21 million for that business. Why? Because we had this approach, this mindset. We're going to find the way to unlock this. I think, you know, it wouldn't have happened otherwise. Okay, step 7, get resourceful. September 2015, we're about to cross the Indian Ocean, our penultimate ocean. This is our route here, over the top of Australia, into Asia, and then over to South Africa. Everyone always asks, by the way, where is the most beautiful island in the world? Officially, it's here. It's called Cocos Keeling in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and it makes the Caribbean look like the River Thames for me. It's that pristine and beautiful. So, I've already mentioned about Nicola, my wife, and you know, between us, we have this real detailed approach to safety and how do we do things. And one of the areas is our rigging. So we have the mast and all the wires that hold it in place. And every single day we're checking this. We're looking at the wires to make sure everything is safe and in the right places. Whenever we stop, we'd send Nicola up the mast to go and check everything. But no matter how well prepared you are, you know, again, you're still going to get some troubles. And we had our second scary moment. We're just south of Madagascar, coming into South Africa, 800 miles to go. And we had rigging failure. This particular piece of rigging here is called a D1, a diagonal one, which comes from the deck level all the way up to the first spreaders on the mast. It's got 19 strands of wire, which are tightly woven together. And one of those strands of wires broke. We sat down as a team and said, okay, what are we going to do about this? And we started to make the repairs that you can see there on the screen. And we got these ropes and we started to put it either side of it. We carried on for another 24 hours and we checked it again. 3 strands were now broken. If a 4th strand had gone, the mast would have come down and we would have had a different set of problems. We had to find a way to figure this out. It reminded me, being back in my business, that we had 80% of my sales pipeline one month with one of my sales guys, and he had a sudden family tragedy which took him out of the business like that. We were going to go bust unless we found an answer to this. I got my senior team together. We said, what can we do? We came up with a new campaign. We sent it out. By the end of the week, we closed an extra £50,000 worth of business that we just wouldn't have got if we hadn't done that. And for me, it's all about the mindset of being resourceful, because a business is just like a boat. You've got what you've got. It would have been easy to say, you know what, it would be much better if we had all the spare parts we needed. In my business, if we had the cash, if we had more clients, if we had better staff, if, right? You've got what you've got, and you've got to get super resourceful with that. With this situation here, what did we do? We very simply asked for help. And I think in your business lives, there's always people around you, friends, connections, partners, people who can see things that you can't see and who might be able to help out. Our friends on the Swedish boat IR, they sailed towards us and they had the equipment that we needed to make the repair, these little D-bolts. In case, by the way, you're wondering why we didn't have those on board, if we'd had every single piece of equipment that we needed, there wouldn't have been enough room for us on the boat. You can't take everything. So we made the repair, we carried on, we got to South Africa. My mum was a little bit worried about us at this point, so she flew out to make sure we got in safely, which we did. But look, the lesson for me here, it's not about the resources you have, it's how resourceful you are. It's your mindset. How do you approach things when things go wrong? Remember that it's okay to ask for help. Look around you. You're an amazing room of people, right? You can help each other. And as I said there, the story about dealing with a cash flow crisis, it's exactly the same in the business as it is in a boat. The final step, celebration. January 2016, we're back in the Atlantic. This is our route here. We're going across to Brazil and then up to the Caribbean where we crossed our outbound track. And this was us celebrating. It was a fairly uneventful passage after the previous ones. And clearly, that was an incredible moment from all those reasons why it shouldn't have happened. But here's the thing. We would only have got to that finish line if we'd celebrated the little victories. Because in my mind, little victories lead to big victories. You develop that winning habit together as a team. You lock in the good feelings. And you have those constant reminders all around you. Whenever we did our quarterly wins with our team at work, we got these huge, great big picture boards. We got all the photos in there. We embedded the values. And we had these constant reminders of all the good things that we were doing together. So that power of celebration, it's so easy to overlook that, especially for the lions in the room, because you want to get on with the next thing, right? I know, because that's me as well. But that locking in that good feeling is so fundamentally important. So as I wrap up, here's the 8 lessons that we've just been through. Where are we heading? Create the culture of we, not me. The relentless action, remembering to focus on what matters most. There are certain things that are far more significant than other things. Building your team, because a happy team is a fast team. Living and embedding your values, because things will go wrong. The whole mindset of resourcefulness, and of course, the power of celebration. But if I was going to pull all of this together and leave you one message, if you're looking to embrace the storms, if you're looking to deal with whatever challenges there lie out there ahead of you, it's this. That if there's something that you really, really want, you will either find a way or you will make a way. Thank you very much.